Hi guys, thank you for watching my video. This video will mostly revolve around my first year of knife making. It will start off with the first knife I ever made and show my progress up to this day. So this is the first knife that I ever finished. It's a backlock knife. The scales are white G10. And if you look closely, you can see the number 5 etched into the blade. This is because it took me 5 attempts to make a knife that was worth even finishing. When it was done, I was really excited. I actually drove around to my friends just showing it off. It does have some blade play, but for my first knife, I was really happy that the locking mechanisms actually worked. This is the second knife I made. It too is a backlock. It has slightly less blade play than the first one. I dared to introduce bolsters on this, and they are made of brass, and so is the liners, as you can see. The scales are bench wood. In comparison to the first knife, this one is a little bit smaller, and I think the design looks better. It's not as bulky as the first one. And it has my initials etched into the blade. So this is my third knife. Since I only had made smaller knives, I wanted to make a larger knife now. This knife also have a nail nick. It's the first time I ever made that. This is also my first slip joint knife. I actually never finished it because I was so unhappy about the mismatch between the bolsters and the scales. As you can see, this is all epoxy. It fits really good in my hand. Now I'm actually thinking about finishing it. What do you guys think? The handle is actually white oak, but I placed it in the oven for 1 hour at 200 degrees Celsius. It made it dark. I think the pattern in the wood is really cool, but it's kind of hard to see on camera. This is the fourth knife I ever made. It's a slip joint. I made it as a birthday gift for my girlfriend. This knife is the first I ever made with no blade play at all. It has a small handle that fits her hand perfectly. The bolsters are made of bronze and the scales are walnut. This knife has two things I never done before. The first one is the half stop. And the second one is I grinded down the pins, although I did so using a file. This knife has actually been used a lot. She brings it along when we go camping, just for preparing food or making spears for the hot dogs over the campfire. The fifth knife I ever made is this one. That too is a slip joint. Has a half stop. The bolsters are made of nickel silver. This white is camel bone, and the scales are from ebony. I got the ebony from my grandma. It was once part of a bookend, but it broke, so I repurposed it for this knife. The blade is a sheep foot or barber style blade, and the nail nick is quite long just for the overall design of the blade. I think it looks really nice. As you can probably tell, I experimented with some spacers between. It's not perfect. The bolsters are kind of out of line. But for my fifth knife, I was really happy about how it turned out, and I still think it's awesome. So moving on, to my mini slip joint folder. It's made out of parts from other failed knife projects. I had so much fun making this one. The bolsters are made out of bronze. They have formed a nice patina. The scales are made from curly maple. They too have been placed in an oven for 1 hour at 200 degrees Celsius. As you can see, it's quite small. No blade play at all. Moving on to number 7. This is my first multi-tool. Bolsters are made out of nickel silver, and the scales are from desert ironwood. It has 2 lock springs, one for the blade. I had to make one spring that works in both ends for the bottle opener and the serrated edge. I call this the party knife. Reason being, this blade is made for cutting cheese. It has a serrated blade to deal with the wine etiquettes, and it has a beer bottle opener, and it has a corkscrew for the wine. That was really hard to make. The snapping game of this knife is really awesome. Over to number 8. It is a spear point slip joint. It has good snapping action, no blade play at all. Although spear points and slip joints are not compatible, it is really fun messing around with making a new kind of blade. The bolsters are nickel silver, and the scales are from premium walnut. It fits my hand really well. For the next knife, I'm actually extending over a 1-year period. This knife is made about 1.5 years into my knife making. So this is my first liner lock. The bolsters are made out of brass. The scales are from Indian ebony. I think the scale is really nice. You can actually see the grain structure. I had a blast making this one, but it was really hard. I think I broke 4 or 5 drill bits just making the slide for the stop bolt. And I learned a lot making this one. First off, I think the button is too large, but with the detent placed where it was, I couldn't make it any smaller. This track is where the detent bolt goes, so if I made it smaller, it wouldn't pop up at all. It would just stop. The firing action is not perfect. In order to get it to pop out, it needs a lot of oil. I usually have to assist it with a flickering in my wrist. I think it worked out great for my first ever try. It's no blade play at all. It's really strong. As you can see, this is my first attempt at decorative filing. I'm quite happy with it. When this knife was finished, I took a long hard look at it and decided to make a new one right away, redesigning all the things I thought would make for a better looking knife. This brings me to my final knife. It too has bolsters made out of brass. The scales are of the same Indian ebony. And the firing action is my best yet. This knife is slightly smaller than the last one. It fits really nice in my pocket. I hardly notice it at all. The blade is quite small, but it's big enough for everyday stuff. So the first thing I wanted to change from the last knife was the size of the button. This button is much smaller. What allowed this was moving the lock bar closer to the pivot point. And the second thing I wanted to change was the bolsters aligning with the frame of the knife. As you can see, it aligns with the gap for the lock bar. In comparison to the first one, you can see it's not even close. The new knife is about 1/10 of a mil off, but I think it's look way better. Also, I wanted the bolsters in the back to align with the spacer. And here you can see the difference. I think it looks better with them all aligned like this. For this knife, I ordered a checkering file online just to give my thumb better grip, and also with a smaller button I needed more traction for when it's gonna fire off. My initial thought was to use decorative filing like in this one, but I decided against it because I wanted to give this knife a cleaner look. I think that if I were to use decorative filing, there would be just too much going on. Just for some added traction, I checkered the front of the scales as well. I think it looks really nice, and it gives extra grip. The knife is 3 mils, and I made some spacers from a plate of brass, which is 0.5 mils thick each. So the back spacer is 4 millimeters, so it matches. For my next knife, I try to figure out how to completely hide the hole for the detent. I'm quite proud of this knife. It works exactly as intended. It fires good every time. And it fits my pocket perfectly. By the way, if anyone can tell me how to get rid of this, I'll be really glad. I want the blade to center perfectly, but it doesn't. I think maybe the lock bar is too tight. I appreciate any advice you guys have. So this wraps up my first year of knife making. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.